Oh, welcome back, my chips and dips, ladies and gents, or whoever else happens to be tuning into this. Today, I just had something on my chest I had to rant about and really get off because it's been on my mind for the past couple of weeks, and I didn't quite know how to articulate it back then. But now I do. And that is the current state of the, should I say, social dialogue. And I should really say the social fabric of this country, the United States. If you're a young conservative male and you've had the unfortunate tidings of watching the dialogue of this country go south, and look, I'd say roughly I'd probably go back to right about the time the internet first popped up. So go back, say, 25 years, give or take. I know the internet they had dial-up and the slow stuff in the 90s, but give or take, you go back about 25 years, roughly, give or take. 25 or 30 years since the internet's been around. And if you look at all this from a bird's eye view, so you've got to put all this into a certain introspection and wind the clock back 30 years, roughly or so, give or take, to really understand this picture of just how far gone, how fractioned, how shattered, and how broken the social fabric has become of this country. And I would argue it was maybe not a direct, but over time, especially after social media, and really an indirect consequence of the internet. And I think this just might be an inevitability. We see kind of the social fabric and how people treat each other, how people interact with each other. I mean, even when I was a kid growing up, heck, and even just like late 90s, early 2000s, people went outside more. People talked to each other more. They held doors open more. They, frankly speaking, were more polite, at least in my anecdotal observation. Take of that what you will. But something very strange has popped up all across the mechanized world in particular. So, the first world, South Korea, Japan, certain parts of China like Beijing, Canada, the United States, Europe, Australia, New Zealand, any part of the mechanized world where they have all this technology like the internet, you can kind of observe very similar observations. People's interconnectivity declines. They don't go out as much, and when they do go out, they're always on their phones now, basically. I mean, heck, I was in a restaurant a couple weeks back. Good service, good food, but everywhere I look around at the tables, I would have never seen it 30 years ago. People just glued to their iPhones and their touch phones and whatever other plastic metal gizmo they've got these days. You name it. And I would have never probably... Well, they had cell phones like, 20-something years ago, 30 years ago, sure. But the cell phones, yeah, they couldn't do as much, but people still talked and held regular, and they could keep up a conversation for heaven knows how long. My old man, rest in peace, he did this better than anyone I know. But he could hold down a conversation, and I look at my generation, I look at the Zoomers coming up, and even some of the Gen Xers to a certain extent. They seem to lack a certain interconnectivity that I find more common amongst older generations. Even conservative men, I see this, young conservative men. So, in short, this is something that I've harped on for a while, this change in the demeanor around the American landscape. Now, I will talk a lot more about the American landscape in particular when I talk about these subjects, because that's where I reside, and frankly speaking, I'm all about America first, because that's where I live, so that's where I care about. But aside from that, something ought to really, really be taken into consideration when you look at all this from a bird's eye view. I think it's going to get worse. You can see this already on social media, this sort of thing happening, where nowadays people don't even want to chat with you. They don't even want to chat with you. They don't want to sit down and give you a seat at the table. It's all or nothing. It doesn't matter whether you're a Republican, Democrat, Libertarian, whatever you may have for a political leaning. The internet has actually been a barrier to connectivity. I don't know if anyone remembers, like 20, 30 years ago, there were all these, big, bold predictions about what the internet would lead to for the future, because it was brand new and bold and ambitious at the time. in hindsight, now obviously at that time, I don't even necessarily fault the creators that were the genius minds behind this phenomenon, but whoever would have guessed all the consequences that would aspire from that or flow from that, because that's what's happened now. People have lost the sense of interconnectedness, ability to hold a decent, interesting, and rather, fruitful discussion that's not grounded in zealotry and dogma and all this other type of myth and just the dogma. And if you try to actually sit down with someone on the opposing side, you'll see it. You see it all over the political arena. It's become so insane. You can't have a dialogue with the other side anymore. Especially if you're a conservative. People, all this talk we give, about don't be a bigot, don't be prejudiced. But you look at the mainstream culture now and with the media bias, mostly from the liberal left, you're conservative. It's openly okay now to be bigoted and prejudiced and a zealot against conservatives or people that actually give a shit about America first and all that other kind of stuff. So, for all this talk about opposing bigotry that especially the progressive left loves to do, it's okay to be a bigot to conservatives these days. It's okay to be a bigot to, anti-mask wearers. It's okay to be a bigot to a lot of these types of people, it seems like. So, this is the fundamental, if you really sit back in perspective, this is the bullshit that modern day society has left us with as conservatives and as people that give a shit about freedom and liberty. We have essentially propped up these institutions for decades because these institutions, I think in some respects, looking back into the history of America, on some level, had a certain connectivity with the commoners and the people they governed. And I see increasingly, because of the internet, more and more of this disconnectivity between the common Americans and the people in which they're governed by. Your oligarchs, your aristocrats, your politicians, your CEOs, your banksters, the people on Wall Street, all these elites, the political elites, you name it. And now the Biden administration, they have such a disconnect from everyday America on the ground, and the internet makes it that much worse. And I know this doesn't sound like a very good red pill, it's more of a black pill moment, but my advice to young conservatives, if you're under 30 especially, don't even fucking bother with politics. It's all a shit show at this stage. Yeah, you can stay informed, every now and then, get a lay of the land, what's going on. But in terms of actually following it, actually tuning in to really follow what the Biden administration's doing, what all these other dipshit, oligarch, asshole, vermin scum of the world are actually doing, I would tune into it. What's the point? What? You going to be able to, what? You going to stop Nancy Pelosi? You going to stop Joe Biden? You going to stop all these deep state oligarch dipshits? No. Fuck them. You just go live your life. Yeah, you know what? You're going to get a lot of flack from people your age. Heck, I get flack from my brother sometimes, but you know what? When all said and done, you're actually going to be better for that. You're going to get a thicker skin than all these dipshit pussies that all you got to do is tell the truth these days to piss them off. So, yeah, it might seem sucky, and at times it's lonely, but in the long run, I think as young conservative American men, we'll actually be a lot better off for it. And I know it's hard to see that in the here and now, because your situation could just very well be shit. Maybe you lost, relationships with certain family or peers or coworkers or colleagues, or maybe not, I don't know. But sometimes holding true to a philosophy has a great personal cost. And I'm still kind of coming to terms with that on myself. But yeah, I think the coming days, I think we're going to see a counterculture where people start actually disconnecting from the World Wide Web rather than becoming more plugged into it. And I don't think this counterculture is going to come from the left. I think this counterculture is going to have to come from the right. Because they're the ones, or at least the conservative, sort of the more conservative-leaning, libertarian, want to be left alone kind of right. They're going to have to be the ones to set this counterculture into motion, because the left ain't doing it anytime soon. The feminists ain't doing it anytime soon. They own all of social media. All of mainstream social media that actually has an influence of reaching people. They own it now, so you may as well not even bother. Just go live life, maybe go out to a bar. Hey, look, learn a certain new skill. Look, I'm taking up French and Spanish now, and daggone it, turns out I'm actually more interested in language than I thought I was. So, look, unplugging from all this bullshit, all this insanity, all this clown world shit. Hey, in the long run, it might actually do you more good if you put your time to use. Because tuning into CNN, tuning into Twitter, and Facebook and social media, yeah, I'm not worth it. I don't. I mean, I've got Facebook, I've got Twitter, and all that, but I hardly use it. I hardly post anything on. All I post on it are game uploads I do from once in the blue moon these days. Hopefully, I can get back into that soon. But yeah, if you're a young conservative American man and you actually give a shit about America first, just unplug from the insanity. Fuck them. Commies are gonna do commie things, and just let them do their commie things. Because you ain't gonna change it. They ain't gonna stop. They haven't stopped in the last, what is it now, 5, 6, 7 decades? Who knows how long? So, they're not gonna stop. You know, the best you can do is keep trotting along day by day and try to reinvent yourself with perhaps the new spare time you'll find you have on your hands once you do unplug from all the insanity of Clown World. But that's all I got for you guys now, and I'll catch you on the flip side. Thanks for tuning in. And until another recording, toodles.